My life was a carefully constructed dream, built on the foundations of predictability and unwavering love. I was a meticulous planner, a lover of order. My career in interior design was flourishing, my apartment was a sanctuary of calm, and my relationship with Ethan was the bedrock of my world. Ethan was everything I'd ever dreamed of, charming, ambitious, with eyes that held promises of a beautiful future. We'd been together for 7 years, and his proposal just 6 months prior had been the joyous culmination of our shared aspirations. We were deep in wedding planning, envisioning a life filled with laughter, children, and quiet evenings growing old together. Our future felt solid, tangible, utterly real. Then there was my sister, Chloe. Chloe was 2 years younger than me, my polar opposite in every way. Where I was reserved, she was a whirlwind of social energy. Where I was pragmatic, she was impulsive, often chaotic. Despite our differences, we shared a bond forged in childhood sleepovers, whispered secrets, and the undeniable familiarity of blood. We weren't always close in the traditional sense, she often seemed to chafe under my perceived perfection or my more cautious nature. But she was my sister, my only sibling, and I loved her fiercely, in that complicated way only sisters can. Ethan, ever the charismatic one, had effortlessly charmed my entire family, including Chloe. He treated her with a polite, almost brotherly affection, always joking with her, listening patiently to her dramatic stories. I saw it as a sign of a healthy, integrated family, a testament to how well my two most important people got along. I trusted them implicitly, a trust as fundamental as the air I breathed. I didn't realize then that the very ease of their relationship was a subtle warning, a dissonant note in my perfectly harmonized life. Looking back, the cracks were subtle at first, almost imperceptible to my trusting heart. Ethan, usually so attentive, seemed increasingly distracted. He'd spend more time on his phone, sometimes leaving the room to take calls, his voice hushed. When I'd ask him about it, he'd offer vague excuses about work calls or stressful client deadlines. His kisses became a little less lingering, his touches a little less tender. Our wedding planning, once a joyous collaboration, started to feel like a chore, with him offering minimal input, often deferring to my choices with a distant air. I attributed it to pre-wedding jitters, the immense pressure of commitment, or maybe even my own anxiousness. I didn't realize then that his withdrawal was a calculated retreat, part of a far more sinister plan. Then there were the peculiar coincidences involving Chloe. She started showing up at places I frequented, claiming it was fate or just in the neighborhood. She'd call me, seemingly out of the blue, to ask about Ethan's schedule, his preferences, his tastes, all under the guise of helping with wedding preparations. She'd offer to run errands for us, to pick up forgotten items, often making an excuse to go to Ethan's office. I thought she was being helpful, supportive, embracing her role as maid of honor. I didn't realize then that these were not just random occurrences, but carefully orchestrated moves, pieces on a board she was playing. The biggest crack, though, was the unsettling shift in communication. Ethan became elusive. His texts grew infrequent, his calls shorter. He'd make excuses to not spend the night, claiming late work or a sudden need to clear his head. My anxiety spiraled. I tried to talk to him, to penetrate the wall he was building. "Ethan, what's going on?" I'd plead, my voice laced with desperation. "Are you getting cold feet? We can talk about anything." He'd offer reassurance, fleeting and hollow, promising to make it up to me, to discuss everything after the stress of work subsided. One particularly unsettling detail was the way my mother reacted. She seemed unusually nervous, almost secretive, whenever Ethan or Chloe were mentioned together. Her eyes would dart between me and Chloe, a worried frown creasing her brow. She'd suggest I give Ethan space, or that Chloe means well. Her usual open warmth was replaced by a guarded formality, a subtle tension that filled the air. I dismissed it as typical parental anxiety, a mother worried about her children's happiness. I didn't realize then that these were not just cracks, but gaping chasms ready to swallow me whole. The last conversation I had with Ethan was a week before our wedding date. He called, his voice strained, filled with a manufactured apology. "I can't do this, Sarah," he'd said, the words like a physical blow. I'm not ready. I need space. I'm leaving town for a while. I'm so sorry." He hung up before I could utter a single word, leaving me shattered, my world imploding around me. No explanation. No goodbye. Just a brutal, final rejection. My life crumbled. The wedding was cancelled, the venue informed, the guests called, the dream future reduced to ashes. The shame, the embarrassment, the sheer desolation, was overwhelming. My family rallied around me, heartbroken and confused. My mother was distraught, comforting me, but there was a flicker of something else in her eyes, a strange, knowing sadness, a hidden secret. Chloe was notably absent during this period, claiming to be too upset to face me, or away dealing with her own issues. I barely noticed, too consumed by my own grief, too lost in the wreckage of my broken heart. I didn't realize then that their sympathy was a cruel illusion, and their absence a deliberate act of betrayal. The climax arrived not in a dramatic confrontation, but in the chilling silence of a social media post. I was still deep in the throes of despair, trying to piece my life back together, when a friend, well-meaning but oblivious, sent me a link. "I thought you'd want to see this," the message read. "Chloe looks so happy." My blood ran cold. Happy? What was she talking about? I clicked the link. It was a wedding announcement. Not a grand affair, but a small, intimate ceremony, clearly recent. The photos were radiant, filled with sunlight and triumphant smiles. The bride, breathtaking in a simple white dress, was Chloe. My sister. And the groom, standing beside her, his arm around her waist, his eyes full of adoration, was Ethan. My fiancé. The man who had promised me forever, the future I had planned, had married my sister. Behind my back. My breath hitched. The world went silent, then exploded into a million shattering pieces. It was like a sudden, brutal awakening, a blinding flash of lightning that illuminated the darkest corners of my life. Chloe. Ethan. Married. The stressful client deadlines, the cancelled dates, the secretive phone calls, Chloe's inquiries about Ethan, her sudden absences during my despair, it all slammed into me at once, a tidal wave of sickening clarity. He hadn't left town to find himself, he had left me to marry my own sister. The emotional chaos was instant, overwhelming. Heartbreak for Ethan, a searing, guttural pain that twisted inside me, not just from his departure, but from the brutal knowledge that his love, his promises, were a lie, a carefully constructed deception. Anger at Chloe, a hot, venomous rage that pulsed through my veins, consuming me, for her ultimate betrayal, her insidious theft. Shame, for being so blind, so naive, so utterly fooled by the two people I had trusted implicitly. And silence. A deafening, echoing silence in my now empty apartment, a silence that magnified the screams in my head. My fiancé. My sister. Married. While I mourned. While I picked up the pieces of my shattered life, they were celebrating their new beginning. The depths of their deception, the cold calculation of their actions, was beyond anything I could have imagined. They had not only betrayed my love and trust, they had mocked my pain, celebrated their illicit union on the very ashes of my broken dreams. I looked at the photos again, focusing on their faces. Chloe, radiant and defiant. Ethan, smiling with an ease he hadn't shown me in months. It was a picture of triumph, built on my devastation. And then I saw the date of their wedding. It was just 2 weeks after Ethan had supposedly left town to find himself. Barely a week after our own wedding date had been cancelled. And that's when I realized, they never loved me the way I loved them. What came after was a raw, visceral struggle for survival. I didn't want revenge that would just burn everything down, I wanted truth, justice, and a chance to reclaim my life. I needed peace, and peace wouldn't come from silence or passive acceptance. The shock wore off, replaced by a cold, burning resolve. I printed the wedding photos, a tangible reminder of their betrayal. My body trembled, but my mind was clear. The first call was to my mother. Her phone rang several times before she answered, her voice sounding wary. "Mom," I said, my voice dangerously calm, devoid of emotion. "Did you know about Ethan and Chloe?" Silence. A long, agonizing pause on the other end. Then, a ragged sigh. "Sweetheart. I was trying to protect you." "Protect me?" I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "By letting them lie to me? By letting them marry behind my back? By letting me grieve a man who was already with my sister?" Her confession was a pathetic cascade of excuses. She knew, she admitted. Not from the beginning, but she'd suspected, then seen evidence, then was directly confronted by Chloe and Ethan. They had begged her to keep it a secret, promising they would tell me when the time was right. They had manipulated her, playing on her desire for peace in the family, her fear of shattering our already fragile dynamics. She thought she was doing the right thing, protecting me from further pain, somehow. But her silence had been a betrayal, a complicity in their heinous act. "You knew," I whispered, the words heavy with disappointment. "My own mother. You knew, and you said nothing. You watched me fall apart." The second limb was severed. The trust with my mother, once unbreakable, shattered into a million pieces. My next step was to confront Chloe and Ethan directly. Not with tears, but with cold, hard facts. I didn't give them the satisfaction of a public scene. I sent them a single, concise email, attaching the wedding announcement and recounting their deception, piece by agonizing piece. My message was clear: there would be no forgiveness, no reconciliation. I wanted nothing to do with either of them, ever again. Ethan replied first, a pathetic, rambling apology, claiming he was confused, overwhelmed, that Chloe had chased him. He even tried to blame me, saying I was too demanding. His words were a fresh wave of nausea. Chloe's response was equally abhorrent, a defiant, self-pitying rant about how she deserved happiness, how I was always the perfect one, how I didn't understand her. No remorse, just self-serving justifications. The public exposure, the true revenge, was more subtle, more devastating, than a single dramatic outburst. I didn't post their wedding photo on social media, nor did I badmouth them publicly. Instead, I carefully, calmly, told my story to trusted friends and family members, revealing the layers of deception without sensationalizing it. I focused on my pain, my confusion, and the ultimate betrayal. The truth, delivered quietly, spread like wildfire. Their perfect, stolen union began to unravel under the weight of public condemnation. Their lives, once so charmed, began to fray. Ethan's career, dependent on his public image, suffered. Chloe, always so desperate for approval, found herself ostracized by many of our mutual acquaintances. The shame, the quiet judgment from those who knew the truth, became their constant companion. They had built their happiness on a foundation of lies, and now, that foundation was crumbling. They were forced to leave town eventually, unable to withstand the relentless whispers and pointed looks. Their stolen happiness became a cage of their own making. My revenge wasn't about vindictiveness, it was about justice and reclamation. It was about ensuring they faced the consequences of their actions, not through my direct malice, but through the undeniable power of truth. I grieved the loss of Ethan, the future we'd planned, and the sister I thought I had. It was a profound, agonizing process, peeling back layers of hurt and anger. I sought therapy, desperately trying to understand how I could have been so blind, how my own family could betray me so deeply. I learned to forgive myself for trusting, for loving. I rebuilt my life, brick by painful brick, but this time, on a foundation of self-worth and genuine connection. I poured myself into my work, found new passions, and cultivated true friendships, relationships built on honesty and mutual respect, not on fabricated illusions. The emptiness where Ethan and Chloe once stood slowly began to fill with my own strength, my own resilience. I didn't want revenge. I needed peace. And that peace began to bloom when I accepted that my story wasn't about their failure, but about my triumph. It was about standing up for myself, about finding my own way, about proving that I could emerge from the wreckage stronger, wiser, and infinitely more whole. I learned that some bonds, once broken by deceit, are irreparable, but others can be forged anew, built on transparency and genuine connection. My journey to truth was painful, but it led me to a profound understanding of who I am, independent of anyone else's narrative. I thought losing them would destroy me, but it made me who I am.